are at the end of the week. It's my Friday, your Thursday. The future is looking bright. G'day, Ed. How are you, mate?
If I had a tail, I would wag it, Rob.
It would be it would be wagging, would it? You'd be happy.
Yeah. How about you? Have you had your coffee and Bicky?
We don't have Bickies first thing in the morning, although it's as tempting as it is to eat a Tim Tam at 4 o'clock in the morning. No, I got my coffee here and I had some Vegemite toast that I'm all set to go. So I've got to get you that address and get you some Tim Tams and some Vegemite and some Aussie stuff. Is there anything else that you want?
I could probably grab it here somewhere or order it on eBay or something, I imagine, right?
Maybe, yeah, I don't know. They just definitely don't sell it in your stores over there, that's for sure.
You don't think?
No, I don't think so. Have you ever had Vegemite before?
I have, and I regretted it like immediately. I mean, what the heck are you guys thinking?
Just have to have Vegemite on a piece of toast with some butter and just a little bit of Vegemite, just to scrape over the top of it there. Something a little bit savory, a bit salty to start your day.
Well, maybe that was my problem. You know, I thought it looks like chocolate, but this looks really good. So I put big old smear, big old mouthful, and yeah, maybe that was my mistake. Huh?
Vegemite's an acquired taste, right? It's like oysters and Guinness and beer and things like that. If you're a young kid, you don't have those things. It's like, oh my God, the flavors are really strong. What I discovered that I like really strong flavors in the morning, really strong black coffee. And if I have like eggs for breakfast or something like that, I have really strong flavors with those things like pickles or salsa or something like that as well. And whenever I eat something like just like plain scrambled eggs and toast like that, it's boring. I have to put some Vegemite with it or something like that.
You know, I don't really go for that. It's an acquired taste argument because
it just tastes like shit.
I can. I mean, that's something that your mom tells you when you're little, and she feeds you something that you don't want. It'll grow on you.
You'll like the broccoli eventually.
Yeah, you know, and I'm sure the WEF has all sorts of campaigns coming up saying it'll grow on you. I can
remember playing.
It's an acquired taste. Yeah, I
can remember playing airplanes with my daughter, and eventually she got a little bit bigger, and you're feeding the little baby. And I think from memory, it was like broccoli and potato that was together. And I was like, meow. And she's like hungry. She opens her mouth, and she was always a good eater like that. And I put it in there, and I kind of looked away to scoop some more out of the bowl. And Susie looked, and she goes, look, she's reverse eating it. She's like, and spit it out with her tongue. And I'm like, and I ate a bit of it, and I thought, yeah, it tastes like crap as well. I'd be reverse eating that if someone shoved it in my gob too.
Well, pretty soon they're going to have you in the backyard scooping up cockroaches and spiders and eating those bugs. It's an acquired taste. Don't worry about it. You might not like it right now, but you'll get used to it. Bug burgers.
You might not like what you see with the Sydney cockroaches. They're about that big.
Well, yeah, I've joked with you before about the size of your bugs there, and I'm really eager to get to Australia. But my only worry is the size of your bugs. I do know. I mean, every weekend on the Discovery Channel, there's some special about the top 5 biggest bugs in the world, and they're all in Australia.
I was out on my morning walk yesterday after I'd finished with you here and was editing some, and there was a big puddle where I was in the scrub, and I had to kind of just go off the path a little bit to get around it because it was too deep to walk through, and I just couldn't go there, so I had to kind of navigate into the bush a little bit, like literally like a meter off the side. And as I was walking forward, I kind of I stopped myself, and as I stopped, I don't know what it was that I saw, something like in my periphery or something like that I saw. But as I stopped like that, there's a big orb weaver spider about as big as my hand, like right there in my face. And I was just about to walk into that bloody thing. And I was like that. And I kind of like saw where the side of his web was, and I ducked under his web. He'd spent all night building that web. I wasn't going to just knock it down. So I moved out of the way.
Oh, that's nice of you. Those are the kind of stories. That's why people are so afraid of Australia. Everyone's convinced that every living creature in Australia is trying to kill you.
Well, I don't know if they're trying to kill you, but they're certainly there trying to eat something.
But I still want to get to Australia. That is top. I don't want to go too far down, but I'll share with you kind of because I already have my fantasy trip all planned out when I go to Australia. I've studied the maps, and I got my my plan. And part of that trip is going to involve taking a cross country, like renting a Range Rover or something, loading it up with tons of water and snake bite kits, and start like the northeast part and go straight down to Perth, and just where there's nothing. I watch all the YouTube videos. Apparently, there's like nothing.
You want to go in a diagonal line from the top right to the bottom left.
Yes, exactly right. And
Ed,
part of it.
there, man.
I know. Listen, for me, that's part of the romance of Australia, is being by yourself, and there's not another living soul around for miles. Now, I just imagine it would be kind of meditative, a chance and just enjoy it and see some scenery along the way. Anyway, that's just, I'm sure nobody else has that fantasy, but that's like a recurring daydream of mine.
Years ago, when I got out of the Navy, between the Navy and the Army, I was out for about 9 months. I had a job and I worked for Budget Rent-A-Car. At the time, my missus worked for Budget Rent-A-Car, and she said, "Why don't you come and work there?" And I worked in the office in King's Cross, and King's Cross is like in the heart of the city. And so all the tourists would come from the airport to the city, and they'd drop off their bags, they go to their hotel rooms, and they would come and rent a car, and they drive around town, and show them around town and all the sights and stuff like that, right? And a lot of them they were finished with their time in Sydney. They were coming to rent a vehicle, and they would drive from Sydney to Cairns. They drive all the way up the East Coast like that. And that's a hell of a trip. If you've never done something like that, I think it's better going that way than it is coming the other way. You're better off going from Cairns to like Brisbane. So come down along the coast, because that's some of the most beautiful parts of Australia, and then track left and go west and head west. And then that way you can get Western Queensland, and then you come down, because Alice Springs is not right in the middle of Australia, and Ayers Rock or Uluru is in the bottom left-hand corner of the Northern Territory. I think they're about 300 or 400 miles apart. It's quite a long way. So you track Western Queensland and then down towards Alice, and then down towards Uluru, and then you can get across to, I don't know if you can get across to Perth from Uluru from that part of the world, because I think you have to track further south to the Nullarbor and come around. So you can't go a direct line across. You've got to go you got to zigzag your way down like that. But yeah, that would be a hell of a trip. That would be a lot of fun, man. Let me know when you're ready, and I'll come and do a couple of legs with you.
Beat me too. I was going to say, I'm going to have to work on and see if I can talk you into taking a week off or 2 weeks off. And
yeah, for sure. I'd be up for that, for sure.
Get into all sorts of trouble. That would be a good YouTube video. We'll have to bring some battery chargers with us for that one. That would be a good one.
In lots of parts of Australia like that, and we'll get into the show in a sec, folks. Let's just give you a little bit of a preamble. Ed's curious about Australia. Yeah. A lot of the places in Australia, you can't drive at nighttime. And did you know that?
Is that because of the kangaroos?
Yeah, it's just too many roos. So you either drive at nighttime with a big giant bull bar in the front of your vehicle, or you just don't drive at sunset. Like places in Western New South Wales, like Broken Hill, around Broken Hill, it's fine. In the town and the city and stuff like that, it's fine. But they're one-horse towns, and if you kind of sneeze as you're driving through, you won't see the bloody thing. It's just go part of the small places. So those types of places in the far western parts of the eastern states, you're going to be really careful. They're dangerous, and you're driving along, you see a big brown snake on the road, you run over it, and then lo and behold, the thing's wrapped around your wheel or wrapped around your axle. How are you going to get the thing off? There's plenty of videos around like that. So it's not so much the snake bite kits you need. You need a big long pair of like shears, like shears that you would cut for. There's all sorts of things that can go wrong out in the bush in the middle of nowhere. And doing something like that by yourself is inherently quite dangerous, because so many things can go wrong. But that's part of the adventure, right?
Yeah, actually it is. I've always wanted to go to weird parts of the world. No one else, I do still want to go to Russia, actually. And I've always wanted to go to places where no one else. Why the hell would you want to go there? I don't know. I like to do things that other people don't want. I mean, the idea of going to a touristy spot like Paris, yawn. New York, yawn. I want to go places. I want to go out of the way. I'd like to go places that most people wouldn't think about going. That's just kind of my thing.
The type of trip that you want to do there, that seems like a real holiday to me, because it's a holiday away from things. But typically for traveling, I don't really like traveling very much. I'd prefer to go somewhere and stay somewhere. Like if you say, Paris, yawn. If I went to Europe and I was going to go to France, I'd go to Paris and stay in Paris for 3 months. I don't want to travel around France. I want to go there. I want to experience the culture and live it a little bit.
Yeah, actually, I am with you on that. Yep. I like the idea of going to and just parking myself and soak it in. No, that's true. I agree. Well, I'll park myself. Look, when I go to Australia, it's not going to be for a freaking week, man. It'll be
You won't get very far. You'll be lucky to get out of Queensland in a week, for heaven's sake.
That's fine. Hey, I'll take a year. I like the idea of parking myself in a spot for a while, get a chance to soak it up. Absolutely.
Yeah, you love it. Awesome. All right, let's get into today's show, ladies and gentlemen. It's great to have you here. Ed and I always love to have a bit of banter here on the front end. We've been chatting about this stuff for years. Let's get into the serious stuff in this crazy world that we're in. I'm going to talk to you this morning a little bit about the Ukrainian counter-offensive, what's happening. We're 98% there. There's a nuclear submarine in South Korea, nuclear armed and nuclear powered submarine. We have to kind of give the distinction now that we have this stupid AUKUS thing. It's nuclear powered, not nuclear armed. No, the American subs are powered and armed. And for the first time in South Korea in 40 years. So that's a very, very new thing that's been going on. I'm going to share a little bit with you about an attack on free speech and just an extension of yesterday's conversation. And Ed's going to close out the show with some face mask controversy, which is kind of funny, hypocritical, and it's really hard to believe that that's actually what they thought was going to keep us safe in some strange flu that was going on in the world. So, ladies and gentlemen, if this is your first time here, welcome to The Unspoken Truth. Ed and I cover current news events and we share our opinions about these things. And we're available over on Spotify, on Telegram, and on Rumble. And don't forget, you can follow us on Twitter. If you can't get some Unspoken Truth via YouTube, you can always get us via the podcast on Spotify and on Apple as well. Just go over there and search for Unspoken Truth. And we're a new show, but I've rebadged an old show over there, and we're starting to get a little bit of momentum and lots of followers, and starting to get some followers trickle in via Telegram as well. So if you're not following us over there, please pop in over there. And in the weeks and months ahead, I'm going to be posting more in Telegram. I'm going to actually do some of that today, and I'm going to be sharing with you a whole series of videos in and around the conflict in Ukraine to give you a different perspective to help you to understand actually what's going on there. We can't show you that here on the mainstream platform of YouTube because for whatever reason, they don't want the truth to be out there. They want the narrative to be whatever it is that they want it to be. But I'm going to give you another side of that. I'll get you outside of the echo chamber. Just know that some of it's a bit of R-rated content. It's pretty hardcore stuff, but you know, that's par for the course. That is what it is. War is pretty brutal, but mainstream media won't want you to see that, but I'm going to show you some of that to help you form a bit of a different opinion. Ed, have you got anything else before we kick off the show and I get into my first little part?
Just please subscribe and like, guys. Please help us out. We're a young channel. Every like does help with the algo. So please take a moment. It doesn't cost you anything. Please give us a like.
Yeah, that helps a lot. So just scroll on down, folks, and hit that subscribe button, ring the bell for us as well. That way you will always have a little bit of unspoken truth in your pocket. And if you're listening on the podcast, thank you so much for your attention and thanks so much for joining us here on the show. All right, I'm going to kick off today and I'm going to share with you what's going on in Ukraine because there's been quite a few developments overnight and there's a bit of stuff that's been happening. So to begin with, the top story really from today is NATO Secretary Jens Stoltenberg has announced that over 98% of the promised combat vehicles have been delivered to Ukraine by NATO allies and the partner countries as well. And this has significantly bolstered Kyiv's military capabilities as it considers launching a counter-offensive against Russian forces. The support includes more than 1,550 armored vehicles, 230 tanks, vast amounts of ammunition and training and equipment of over 9 new Ukrainian brigades, totaling more than 30,000 troops. Notably, NATO partner countries such as Sweden and Australia, can you believe it, have also provided armored vehicles. Stoltenberg, speaking from Brussels, stated that this support will put Ukraine in a strong position to continue retaking occupied territory, thus strengthening its negotiating position in potential. So is he flagging that, hey, this is not going to end on the battlefield, it's going to end in negotiation? Well, I think we all know that wars always end in negotiation, but he's flagging it there for the first time. Meanwhile, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has had his first contact with Chinese leader Xi Jinping since Russia's full-scale invasion yesterday. We reported that on yesterday as well. Despite the positive reception there from Ukraine and Western officials, the conversation hasn't really resulted in any immediate shift in peace or prospects of peace or anything like that. The Chinese said that they're going to send an envoy to Ukraine, which is a good thing. And if they can be the mediators in between the Russians and the Ukrainians, that can only be helpful, because this has to stop. So China is seeking to establish itself as a global diplomatic power, and it's refused to criticize Moscow's invasion, which I think is strange as well. And it's maintained that Russia has a diplomatic ally in opposition to US influence in global affairs, which I find a little bit amusing. It's kind of like the Chinese see what the Americans are doing and they're trying to do the opposite, just to deliberately piss them off. In other news in the conflict, Ukraine continues to take a heavy toll on civilians. Between Wednesday and Thursday, at least 7 civilians were killed and 33 were injured. So it's a pretty awful state of affairs, folks. It's pretty horrible what's going on, and it continues to actually happen, which is, in my mind, it just seems really, really strange. It seems strange that this is going on in this day and age, and what's happening with it. I don't get it. So I just wanted to dive into a quick screen share here with you folks as I get tongue-tied at 5 o'clock in the morning. I want to share with you some of the developments that have been happening over in the eastern part of the map here. And for those of you who are listening, I'm just showing the deep state map and giving you folks an update on what's going on. So we can see that there's not much more happening in Bakhmut. We're just going to be careful with my mouse here as I scroll in. It just goes a bit nuts. It looks like the Kromatov intersection has still not been taken by the Russians. The grey part denotes the fighting here, but it looks like the Wagner Group and the Russians have nearly taken the whole city, and we're still resisting there. There's no chance that they're going to be encircled. They've been trying to do that now for months, and it hasn't happened. They haven't been able to push past the defensive lines in the south or the north there. So Bakhmut seems to be at a bit of a stalemate, and we seem to be bleeding those Wagnerites and those Russians dry in that part of the world. If I come on down to the bottom part of the map, into the southern part down here, we can see that over near Kherson, we've had some progress, and some of the ground has been taken on the southern side of the Dnipro River, which is pretty interesting, particularly in and around Kherson here, because all the bridges that were over there were completely destroyed and dropped by the Russians. So over here at Antonivka here, that bridge was dropped, and that has been shelled in the last couple of days. So it looks like the Ukrainians are seeming to establish a beachhead here. But if I scroll out of the deep state map and show you another map, what you'll see is that this part of the world is just swamps. There's like literally nothing you can do. If you can establish the beachhead here and get to Olenshki here, this place here, if you can get to there and establish that as your front line there, then that might give you the opportunity to bring your logistics in and your supply lines there as well. But the Russians have dug in pretty heavily, particularly up over here near Zaporizhia, because the Ukrainians don't really have the capability to pull in via the river here, because it's such a big divide, and they're able to resupply themselves from Kherson here. So the most likely part of the counterattack, and I mentioned this the other day, is back through Zaporizhia, where they're coming down this road here to Melitopol, and they'll divide the Russians here in half. When they divide them in half, they'll take out the Kerch Bridge again, because we've got the ability to do that now with long-range standoff, JDAM. If they can get from here, they'll be able to take the ground and cut them off. And if they can cut the Russians off here and cut them in half, they end up on a couple of different fronts. And particularly if they take down the bridge again, which is a pretty interesting proposition. So there's a whole series of photos that have come out in the last couple of days about a series of underwater drones that have been created. I'm not quite, I don't have the dexterity to pull it out, but these things look like torpedoes, and what they called them was underwater torpedoes, and they have pretty extended ranges. The thing is under the water, and it's got like a GPS antenna that comes out of the top of it. It's a little bit like what you see when you see a surveyor walking around and someone's pegging out a property or something like that. The surveyor's got his pole, and on top of it, it's got an RTK antenna that goes there. And these submarines sit below the waterline. They travel at low speed. They're made of plastic, so you can't really see them. They're silent as well, because they've got electric motors, and you can see the way that the motors are actually moving. And they have these big long extended ranges of a couple of 100 miles. So part of the problem that the Russians have had down in Sevastopol in Crimea is their ships are harbored in that part of the world, on the northern part of the harbor, and they've put all submarine nets in there, and they've mined it all in there as well. And what we're seeing here is the Ukrainians adapt to that old school thinking, that old school mentality. Those old school Russian admirals go, that's not a problem. This is how we solve those problems. And the Ukrainians are just using asymmetric warfare. So there's 20-year-old kids on the front line building drones and building explosives. And I can't think of anything more that would be more fun than that. Imagine having the gazillions of dollars from NATO, all the explosives in the world, and thinking about how to use asymmetric warfare against Russians. I saw just before this, as well as an additional update to what's going on in the front, that the Ukrainians tried to take out Putin with a drone. Yeah, and that drone was, I don't think it was shot down. We were talking about this yesterday as well. It doesn't appear to have been shot down. It looks like it clipped a tree and crashed, because it crashed like upside down, and it didn't explode or anything like that, and it wasn't damaged. It was just in pieces, like someone crashed their own remote control plane. So the sensors on that thing and the obstacle avoidance on that thing is obviously not as good as the Chinese DJI technology, but what they got to do is pull some of those sensors off and put it on these things and implement that. It can't be hard to code those sorts of things, because it's all open source and you can do that relatively easily. But yeah, I don't know. I read the story and I thought, I felt myself being drawn into it. I'm drawn into this story. I'm like gravitating to it. And I went, stop it. And I pulled myself out, because it's propaganda. Yeah, it's propaganda. The Ukrainians saying, we flew the drone. It went within 30 kilometers of Moscow and blah, blah, blah. And it was full of explosives. And here's the and it was, there's the footage that was all real. And we were trying to assassinate Putin. You don't know where he is. Come on, man. Like, where's the Prime Minister of Australia right now? I don't know. Where's the President of the United States right now? I don't know. Where's Putin? I don't know. He's not running around with a mobile phone in his pocket, the NSA saying, oh, here he is in St. Petersburg in this building here on that level, like some Jason Bourne movie, and I'm looking through the windows with a thermal camera or thermal binoculars about to call in an airstrike. What a load of rubbish. Just propaganda. And, you know, it is what it is. But hopefully on May Day, coming up in those May Day parades, we're going to see some real asymmetric warfare with maybe for the first time, we'll see some swarming drone attacks happening in Moscow. So what we're seeing in the lead up to that is potentially a pretense for it as well. There's a video going around as well. I'll try and dig that video out as you're talking. I'll show it to you because it's pretty interesting. There's a Ukrainian guy. He's sitting on the roof of a 4-wheel drive, and the camera angle is like from the bottom of in front, it's probably about 2 or 3 meters in front of the car, looking up at him, and he's standing there or sitting on the car, and he goes like this. He points like this, like an old cavalry guy, charge like that. And as he goes charge like that, there's about 200 drones that fly over the top of him, and they're not like off the shelf DJI Chinese drones. They're all FPV drones. So someone's wearing a pair of goggles, controlling that thing, and they're flying over. And that is the future of warfare. So the Chinese are known to have mastered that technology, and the Ukrainians have adapted to that technology in the last couple of months. And I think we're going to see that being a large part of the counteroffensive. And how do you counter all of the dug-in Russian troops just south of Zaporizhia? Because there's pretty extensive work that's happened there. And you do that typically with artillery and armor. That's combined arms, right? So you send artillery, armor, helicopters, engineers, airstrikes forward like that, and they're used combined, and the infantry comes in behind all of that. But I think before any of that happens, because the anti-armor threat is such a high probability, so the Ukrainians are not going to want to send their fancy new Leopard tanks forward or their Challenger tanks forward, only to be smacked off the battlefield in the first hour of the war with all the Russian Hornet missiles. So what they'll do is they'll take out the anti-armor crews with all of the drone technology, because we can stand off a couple of kilometers away to be able to do that. So we use the artillery to get their heads down. They get their heads down, then the drones come in and take them down. Now the armor moves up. Now the infantry move up, and we can take them all down. So very, very targeted and very, very asymmetric, if you like. And that's not something that the Russians can actually defend against. There's literally nothing that you can do. And I've noticed that my Telegram feed in the last maybe 2 weeks, week or so, probably more so about a week, has filled up with lots and lots of asymmetric warfare, meaning these first-person drones, first-person meaning someone's wearing a pair of goggles, the drone has got an RPG round underneath it. So it's quite a big round, right? It's not just a little hand grenade anymore or something like homemade thing. It's an RPG round, and they've rigged that thing to detonate when it hits. So the drone's flying along, and these resupply vehicles are driving along unprotected, just a truck, right? Just a truck with a tarp over the back of it, and they fly along and they fly around them. And what you see, they fly around them and they aim for the fuel tank of the truck. Boom, blows the truck up. And there's always a surveillance drone, an ISR drone, standing off watching it. So the footage that you see, and I can't show it on YouTube, right? Because I'm not allowed to show explosions on YouTube, and because it denotes that somebody is getting hurt, injured, or killed, right? Which they are. So the drones fly around and you see the FPV version of it, and it lines up to kind of hit the fuel tank or wherever it's hitting, and it does that. But then they kind of jump out with the footage and they show you how the ISR drone shows what actually happens, and it completely incapacitates the vehicle. Even if it doesn't take down the people that are in the vehicle, that vehicle is no longer a possibility. And as the Russians were trying to resupply the southern part of Ukraine, and that's why in the deep state map I say from Zaporizhia they're going to come down to Melitopol, the Ukrainians have destroyed all of the Russian logistics supply lines coming in. And they were systematically destroying all the vehicles and all the transport that the Russians were using to come down. Remember, wars are a battle of logistics. They're not one on the front line. You know, it's that old saying that amateurs talk about strategies and tactics and professionals talk about logistics. And the Ukrainians have taken a leaf out of that Sun Tzu playbook, and they've destroyed all of the Russian ability to transport their troops. They can still get in there, but guess what? You have to walk. And, you know, that kind of sucks for an infantry guy. It sucks even more for a non-infantry guy, because it makes life really, really difficult because you've got to carry everything, and then it just slows everything down. And it's just not possible for them to get any sort of scale there. So we're 98% there. Are they going to wait for the next 2%? I would suggest to you that the last 2% of the 100% before they're ready to go with a counterattack is the actual weather. And now we're nudging up against the end of April here. I think the first week of May we'll see this thing get going, and I believe it'll be to the south. There's a few people saying that they would. There's a few Ukrainian guys out there saying we're actually going to go and take Belgorod to the north because we can go in from Kharkiv. And I never showed that. I should show that because it's actually quite funny. Where's the deep state map? It's still open. There it is there. So the idea is, you know, my prediction is they're going to come to Melitopol here, but they're also saying that they could go through the gap here and go and take Belgorod here. And there's a funny meme that I've been seeing going around. There's a picture of Putin and Shoigu sitting at the table, and Putin says, "How's the war going?" And he goes, "Oh, it's all right. We retook Belgorod." And it's like, so nothing is really happening on the Russian front. But if the Ukrainians go and take Russian territory like that, and they're going to use that as a bargaining chip, I think we're going to be in big trouble. But look, let me not be a mouthpiece of deep state and mainstream media, folks, because I want to give you my real view. And here's the unspoken truth. Yeah. Here's the unspoken truth is that we know from intelligence, from what Russians have said, from what Ukrainians have said, and what NATO has said as well. And this is the unspoken truth. This is the quiet part out loud that I'm going to say to you, is that the Russians have got more than 400,000 people on the front. Yeah, and it's a big front, of course, but there's 400,000 people. And the Ukrainians have amassed 9 brigades of 30,000 troops. So we talk about asymmetric warfare using drones and using strategies and tactics to take these guys down. But the reality is the quantity that the Russians have is far greater than we could ever possibly muster. And their ability to outsuffer and outlast us is extensive. So I'm really worried that unless this counteroffensive actually works, this is the last roll of the dice for the Ukrainians, the very last roll of the dice. And if it doesn't work, I believe that the Russians will absorb all of it, and they've got nowhere else to be. They don't have to go anywhere else. That's the land that they want to take. I think they're just going to come back, take all the land, and I think it's going to end even worse for the Ukrainians. So a really big problem. And I think the unspoken truth is that this is the last throw of the dice for the Ukrainians before the potential for this to go away completely forever. And maybe they go away completely forever as well. It's a very scary proposition. Ed, that's me for the first segment. What do you think?
Well, I wonder whether that's why President Xi and Zelensky are taking such long baths together. Maybe maybe Zelensky is saying, you know what? Yeah, let's talk, Mr. Xi. Yeah, what do you got for me? Maybe that's why. Maybe
it's the last throw of the dice before they actually sit down and do something about it. Hopefully.
Well, yeah. As part of that document leak that came out a couple of weeks ago from that young, National Guard lieutenant, some of the documents were documenting a lot of the Pentagon's concerns over Ukraine's viability in this war. They were saying a lot in those documents, yeah, I don't know, this doesn't look very good. That's one of the reasons why this guy got in so much trouble. They didn't want that information out. So, maybe, I mean, what we hear for public consumption by the spokespeople is one thing, but knowing what they actually think is completely different. So, but I think as time goes on, it's going to become more and more clear, especially if this spring offensive starts to play out and the advancements are going to be undeniable. That's when we're actually going to start seeing the real picture. Right now, a lot of this is speculation. We can make assumptions. We don't know what's propaganda, what's real. Although I think we're pretty sure that Russia probably does have a lot more guys than Ukraine does. That's not a stretch to assume, right? So, yeah.
I have to say, there was one thing that I saw before I made my coffee and sat down here to record with you. And I was just looking through my Telegram channels and catching up on what was going on there in case I've missed anything. And I can see the Patriot systems are now in Ukraine. And I think of all the things that we've given to them, that might be one of the most expensive and most complicated things. Next thing, of course, would be aircraft. But we've given them aircraft. We've given them MiG-29s and all sorts of things like that. So it's not really a stretch to give them Western aircraft. It's just another version of it. But the Patriot systems are in country. There's a picture of a fella. He's taken a selfie of himself in front of the radar. Yeah. And the picture is cropped right in. So you can kind of see like where my arms are. And if you're listening to this, you can kind of see just down the side of his shoulders, right? So you can't quite see his shoulders. You can see his face. And then he's about halfway down the frame. And above him, you can see the radar system of the Patriot. And you can clearly see that that's a Patriot. I know that that's a Patriot. I just know, right? But what he doesn't realize what he's showing. And here's where I was actually quite pissed off, if I'm honest. And I'm not pissed off with the photo. I'm pissed off with what they did with the bloody thing. And when I look, I can see that the wheels of the trailer that the radar is on are completely covered in mud. And it looks like the radar system is bogged in the mud. And I'm like, seriously? We give you hardware worth hundreds of millions of dollars and we give you all this training and we're trying to save you and you're too stupid to go out and you go out and drive it in the scrub and it gets bogged in the mud. Now it's like a sitting duck of a target. I know you can defend yourself, the whole thing. It's a surface-to-air missile system. But man, oh man, really? And I just thought, and to your point, when you said they're not so, that report came out, all of that intelligence was leaked saying that we're not so happy with what's going on. And I can't help but think that that's what reminded me of that photo is I'm not happy with what's going on there either, because we're sending you hundreds of millions of dollars worth of gear and sacrificing everything. And it's caused all sorts of chaos around the world over a bloody border dispute that you could have fixed up if you had sat down and talked to each other. Come on, man. And we're going to give you this gear, treat it with respect, do it properly. And anyway, that's the unspoken truth of me being pissed off on my high horse about Patriot missiles.
Well, you think the Pentagon is unhappy right now. Wait until Ukraine decides to join BRICS nations. Then that's
wait until they let the Chinese come in rebuild with the Silk Road.
Yeah. What happened?
Yeah. We're gonna build a pipeline for your grain. Don't worry about your gas. Yeah. That's really gonna piss the Americans off. Yeah. Too funny. All right, shall we segue into your little part? Let's talk about the next potential front to open up, shall we? That's South Korea. I believe that's the flashpoint for World War III, actually. Let me jump out of the stream and I'll hand over to you, Ed. Go for it.
Okay, so as Rob said, for the first time in over 40 years, America is sending a nuclear-armed nuclear submarine to Korea. Now, I'm sure there are reasons why they haven't been there in 40 years, but now they're making a special point to send a nuclear submarine, and they're letting the world know about it. So they're not making a secret about it. They want Pyongyang to know that it is there. So let me show you a few clips announcing the development.
Today, the president announced the U.S. is sending nuclear-armed submarines to South Korea. For the first time in decades, this is, of course, coming as tensions with North Korea rise. So why did the White House decide to send these nuclear defense systems to the region now?
Well, Savannah, there's a sense that the nuclear threat from North Korea is only growing. So the U.S. announced that it would be sharing more intelligence with South Korea and also providing more military assets on a rotating or temporary basis. President Biden said in the Rose Garden, it's all about deterrence.
What their, quote, ironclad alliance against North Korea.
Leaders from both nations have announced a new nuclear deterrence plan, which will see Washington sending nuclear-armed submarines to dock in South Korea.
Okay, now this is a North Korea story. It's not particularly a Taiwan story, right? This is a separate issue. But again, regarding Taiwan, if that situation blows up, if you haven't upgraded, look, for those of you who are planning on getting a new cell phone or a new laptop or anything with a chip in it, do it now. Do it sooner rather than later. Okay, don't wait around. Get it done, and get yourself prepared. All right, you got to do all your prep work. Get your water. Get your food. Get prepared. So I want to kind of take this opportunity to remind you guys to do your prep work in case you've kind of gotten lazy about it. If you started to work through your supplies, get out there and start resupplying. Get prepped. Now, am I predicting a nuclear war? Well, no, hopefully not. But you never know what could happen in this day and age. So just be prepared. Rob, I've got a couple questions for you on this. So first question is, so how common is it for nuclear submarines to park themselves off the coast of their adversary? I mean, it's got to happen. It's got to happen, right? I mean, do Russian subs, patrol out the coast of New York and California? Is this uncommon? This event, is it really that uncommon? Everyone's making a really big deal about it, but is it really that uncommon of a development?
It's a good question, Ed. And the reason that people make a big deal about it, the media especially, is because submarine activity is highly classified. So when this is going on, we don't really know where any of those assets are. We don't know what's happening. What we do know is where their assets are, because we've got way more sophistication in that technology than they do. We have an asymmetric advantage against them. It's like clubbing baby seals with our equipment. And I told you a couple of stories when I've been on surface warships going up against Australian submarines, diesel electric ones, and then nuclear powered submarines and Los Angeles class subs as well, Ohio class submarines. I've been up against them as well. And you last about like 3 nanoseconds on a surface warship. If the Chinese get any ideas about surrounding Taiwan and blockading them, and it gets a little bit kinetic, then the US Navy, the British Navy and the French Navy and the Swedes and the Norwegians will come and just decimate the Chinese Navy. And that will end quickly. The Chinese Navy don't stand a chance. And the reason for that is there's only so many times you can hit a tennis ball against the wall by yourself. Yeah. You get really good at hitting a tennis ball against the wall, right? One of the greatest cricketers of Australian history, Don Bradman, was known for having a stick, like a broomstick, not much bigger than the arm that's on this microphone here, and hitting a golf ball. Yeah, so he had a really good eye for that. And then when he went out on the cricket pitch, he had this big, giant, fat bat, this big, giant red ball coming. He was like, whack, not ever going to miss that. And that's what we do consistently, right? We're consistently training against each other. The Chinese have never trained against anybody in anti-submarine warfare or sub-to-sub warfare. So they have absolutely zero idea of what they're doing. And they will be clubbed like baby seals on the first week of the war. They will be destroyed. Their Navy will be destroyed. Their submarine force will be destroyed as well. In answer to your direct question, is it something that happens all the time? I don't know. I was never a submariner. And even if they were there, what you'll find is they'll still be in international waters because our sensors are sophisticated enough to actually target you over the horizon. When I was in the Persian Gulf, we were right up against the KAA, which is the only waterway that leads into Iraq. So as you come around the bottom of the bottom of Oman into the Straits of Hormuz, the Iranians control the Straits of Hormuz, and you can see Iran and you can see the UAE on like both sides, and you drive through it. The Iranians know that you're coming. You call them up on the radio, tell them what you're doing, you come through, and they let you through, right? And there's been a couple of times where the Iranians try and shut you down. Anyway, we would track into the Persian Gulf and we would go right up to the northern part, right up to Iraq. And what we were doing was enforcing the UN sanctions against Iraq. So at the time in 1996, when I was there, there was the Southern no-fly zone. So after the war ended in 1991, the Americans and the Allies pulled out of there, and we said that we're not going into Iraq. We just liberated Kuwait, and the Kurds were in the south. And what had happened is the Iraqi army said, right, we don't want the Kurds here, and they started attacking the Kurds with their air force and their helicopters, and it was devastating. They were just killing everything, right? And that's when we implemented the southern and northern no-fly zones. And the Air Force and the Navy went there and patrolled up and down there all day, every day, saying, if you come south of here with your Air Force, we will destroy you. And it happened a couple of times. A few times when I was there was airstrikes that happened, and they were bombing and things were happening there. But what we were enforcing as part of those UN sanctions, they were only allowed to import and export certain things. And what the ships would do, the ships would come south out of the KAA, and they would make a left-hand turn and stay inside of international waters. So the territorial zone of, like, the waterway is literally, one side of it is Iran, the other side is Iraq. So they'd come out and they'd make a left-hand turn, and they'd stay in Iranian territorial waters. And we would just stand off over the horizon. So my job, you'd sit there and you'd look at the radar, go, oh, there's a ship coming, we'd launch a helicopter, go and have a look at it, make sure it was, is it worth investigating? Yeah, it's worth investigating. Recover the helicopter. The ship would come out, turn left, and then we would stand off over the horizon, and we would shadow them as they would go along there, because we couldn't go into Iranian waters. And there's all these oil rigs around there. You've got to navigate around the oil rigs. But we just stand off over the horizon with our radars, because we could see them and we could track them. And eventually, sometimes they would stop in Iranian waters, and you'd see another ship come up alongside it like this. And then it would be a big jumble of mess, and there'd be all these other boats and dhows around there, and you can't tell on the radar which one's which. Then you're like scratching your head going, we've been watching these things for days now, like which one's which? And I don't know. And there's a couple of times where the ships came around into Iranian waters and didn't stop. They just hugged the Iranian coast, so inside of their territorial waters. And this is the long way of me saying that this is what submarines do as well, right? They stand off. They don't need to be right up against the coast, and we can listen to everything, and we can see whatever we need to see. And the ships would, they would try and make a break out of Iranian waters to come south to Dubai and to the UAE and to Bahrain and stuff. But we knew that they were carrying illegal cargo, because if it wasn't illegal, they would just come, they'd just track straight out, because that's the shortest route out, is just to drive straight out the middle, down the middle of the Gulf, and you don't have to navigate around the territorial waters or the littoral waters or anything like that. So I remember coming on watch one morning, and everything's like, there's like a buzz going around. Like, what's wrong? We're about to launch, and this ship is coming. It's about to come out of Iranian waters, and we're about 25 miles away from it. And the skipper like turns the ship, points it north directly at Iran, and like turns it up. We're going at 30 knots, and I can hear like Ride of the Valkyries playing over the speakers there. And I'm like, what is going on? And the ship's like going like this. It's everywhere. And I'm like in the passageway trying to get to the ops room, and I get into the ops room. They're like, launch the helicopter. That helicopter launches. Everyone's like armed to the teeth, and we storm over the horizon. The ship's coming out, and the warship comes down. It's like, big skid there. Launch the helicopter. They fast rope onto the thing and get up onto the bridge. And the most illegal thing the guy's got is a Mars bar wrapper on his dashboard there. Like, giant waste of resources, man. Giant waste of resources. Giant waste of time. And, enforcing sanctions on a country where it's been destroyed by war for the last 20 years, like, what a waste of time. Good fun, cool story.
Yeah, you got a good story out of it. No, I think I need to correct you as part of the story. What you meant to say is the ship turned to port. It didn't turn left. It turned to port.
Oh, we didn't turn left. Yeah. That wasn't very nautical of me, was it?
I just that's an inside joke by everyone.
I didn't want to confuse you.
Yeah.
You got port right. There it is. It was right there.
Okay.
No, I do know some mates that were in the Navy when I was back in the day. Before we had the Collins class submarines, we had these things called Oberon class submarines. And man, oh man, this looks like something out of World War II. I'll find a picture of it for you and I'll send it across to you. You'll be like, what the hell? And really super old school stuff. But I know that those guys were always up in the Malacca Straits, up and around near China and the South China Sea and whatnot. And that was back in the days where everything was like Morse code. I went through combat systems training with a bunch of guys that had signed up and joined up to be electronic warfare analysts. And they were pegged to go to O-boats. And their So I went to combat systems school. You learn about radar, you learn about sonar, electronic warfare and stuff from a surface combatants like perspective. And all those guys did, they were electronic warfare people, and there were boys and girls there as well. But all they did for the first 6 weeks of their course, they had headphones on like you did, and all they did all day long was Morse code. Literally for 16 hours a day was Morse code. And I think there was about 40 of them that started, and about 3 of them passed. It's like a special forces thing of submarines, and to be an EW analyst required this huge level of skills. Not only did you need to be able to do Morse code and read that and understand that, then you had to have language ability, and you had to have and then the EW stuff is so damn hard as well. In the days before computers, we had to do all that stuff manually, and oh man, it was like a really hard thing, because I always thought, oh, that'd be a pretty cool job. I didn't know anything about submarines, but that looked like pretty attractive. It looked like fun. And then when they started kind of falling off the perch, I was like, that doesn't look like so much fun now.
Okay, so let me circle back to North Korea. Okay, so many times in the past when you and I have had discussions, you have mentioned that you thought that North Korea does not get the attention that it deserves as a potential flashpoint in the world, and you think, man, those aren't the people to worry about. These are the people to worry about. You've always thought that that North Korea posed the largest nuclear threat potential out there, right? Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. So we have a strategic deterrence. The whole reason nuclear weapons exist is because if you get any ideas, I've got nukes too, right? And the strategic deterrence has always been for the Russians. So when I say we, I mean us, Five Eyes. I mean Australia as well, because we fall under the nuclear umbrella. If we were ever attacked, you guys would come and rescue us, right? So, well, that's the theory anyway.
Mm-hmm.
But the North Koreans we don't really have a strategic deterrence for North Korea, because they were never a nuclear power. We don't really have a strategic deterrence for the Iranians, because they were never a nuclear power either, but they both are. And I was watching a video yesterday, and there was a bunch of these generals and admirals in front of a committee in the US, and it was about missile defense. And we've got about, I think there in the US, you've got about 20 missiles, like anti-ballistic missiles, that you could take down an ICBM with. And the problem that we have now is that the Russian warheads that come off the Satan II missiles, there's like 15 warheads on one missile, but there's several of them that are decoys. So in 2 missiles that the Russians fire at you, they could just fire Satan II ICBM that was full of decoys. It would completely saturate and dry up all of the anti-missile ballistic defense that we have. So there's different layers of defense that they have. So you have an Aegis system at sea. You have theater high altitude ballistic missile defense there as well, which defends against these things as well. But the problem that we've got is we've got threats coming from this direction. Now we've got threats coming from this direction, and now they're coming from this direction from behind us as well. And our stuff is only built to face this way. So the North Koreans are able to outmaneuver us, and they can saturate and overwhelm our defenses with what they've got. It's now stated that they've got more than 100 warheads. And we've seen the footage of Kim Jong-un walking in like a bunker, and there's like rows and rows of the warheads, and that's actually what they are. I don't know if it's propaganda or it's real. Assume that it's real. Why would they put that out there if it's not? And in the last military parade that they came up with, they counted 11 ICBMs that they now have. So if they continue on the same trajectory as that they're going, building these ICBMs and testing them, so think about it. We've got 20 missiles to defend against 11 ICBMs. So we're 9 short. Yeah, well, sorry, the North Koreans are 9 short. So if the North Koreans get to 21, then your missile defenses are completely saturated, and a strike from North Korea would be potentially at a point where that's going to happen to you. If they launch all of their arsenal at you, you're toast. One of them's
okay,
get
yeah,
through.
but wouldn't you agree that North Korea is essentially a proxy government of China? North Korea isn't going to do anything without the blessing of China, right?
100%. And that's where I think if the North Koreans begin invading the South, or something happens, that's when you got to get your grab bag and get your bug in plan or your bug out plan, because that's the beginning of the end, right? Because the Chinese will open up the war on 2 fronts, meaning they get North Korea to attack South Korea, and then that's carte blanche for them to go over to Taiwan and have a crack. And the Chinese, the only advantage that they actually have is the proximity of where they are. So it takes us time to move our forces into place and to get the disposition right, so we have the opportunity to actually counter that. But the reality is you're not going to be able to counter that in the first couple of days of the war. But the Taiwanese are strong enough to hold out for at least a month. So that gives us enough time to reposition forces and get it into place. So it's a very complicated scenario, and Guam is a big factor as well. Then carriers are a big factor as well, and then everything that we've got with the Quad. So if we just cut the Chinese off from their fuel supply in the Indian Ocean, that could be a way to do it, and then use our submarine force to sink their navy. That's the end of it. It will go away quickly. But the problem with North Korea, if they get the okay to invade South Korea, it will be on a scale that makes Ukraine look like a kindergarten picnic, because there's a million troops facing off against each other right now. A million troops. And it's a very, very nasty scenario.
Well, the reason why I wanted to bring up this story is because it's not being covered very deeply. I mean, the news is out there, made a few headlines, but then they quickly move on to the next story. I just want to make sure everyone is aware of it, and just keep an eye on it. You know, it's something you want to be aware of. And stay tuned to the Unspoken Truth, because we will keep you posted. All right. So you want to.
You're 100% right, and I'll close out this little segment and throw to the next one with this little thought here for you, Ed. You're right, it is the unspoken truth. During the Trump years, the North Koreans didn't fire hardly any ballistic missiles. They didn't do very many tests at all. But since Trump's gone away, little rocket man himself has fired and tested more ballistic missiles and missile technology in the time that Biden's been in place than he has in the whole time that North Korea has existed. So they're escalating to a point that you wouldn't believe. And they're not as dumb as what you think. They've been studying and watching our strategies and tactics for the whole time they've existed. And what they recognize, and the North Koreans have come out and said this, what they recognize is if we mass forces, the threat is imminent, and they have the opportunity to fight back before we act. So think about it. Before we went to Iraq the first time in the early 1990s, what was first? Desert Shield, then Desert Storm. And Desert Shield was a buildup of about 4 months. So they know that we build up in South Korea, there's nowhere to build up forces. But if I put a couple of aircraft carriers either side of the peninsula and I mass my forces in South Korea and get the disposition of them ready to go, they look like they're going to go on the offensive. The North Koreans will strike before we actually get going, even if it's an exercise. And that's why they put their hands up and say, hey, we're about to do an exercise. This is an exercise. This is not something like that. But I don't think there's any such thing as an exercise anymore. There's only exercises covering a real invasion and a real opportunity. That's what the Russians did. It's crazy stuff, hey? It's a geopolitical nightmare, really.
It's a fascinating topic, and it's a complicated one, and it's one that you and I can spend the rest of the day on if we wanted to, because first of all, we're willing to. Well, there's a lot of material there. This is a complicated topic, but in the end, people, all you can do is take care of yourself. All right. Yeah. That's your priority. Your priority is to look out for your own finances, your own prepping, and to get prepping get prepped physically, financially, emotionally, spiritually. Get your community put together. Start doing it now. And a couple of years ago, I'd be considered a crazy prepper, and I didn't do any prep work. A couple of years ago, I wasn't doing it, and now I'm a big believer in it. And anyway,
now you got more toilet paper in your garage than you ever thought would be humanly possible.
I'm all ready to barter when it comes. So yeah. So let's moving on to the next segment, Rob.
All right. Let's throw to the next story. Here we go. So where's my trusty little teleprompter here? Let me share with you a story on free speech, folks. Ed and I were talking about free speech a little bit yesterday and why that's important. And although you might agree with this story and you might agree with the way that this particular government has behaved, you might also not agree with it as well at the same time. So here we go. So Telegram, the popular messaging app, is facing removal from the Brazilian app stores. So this is happening in Brazil after a federal court issued a temporary ban on the service. Judge Wellington Lopes da Silva has ordered Google and Apple to remove the app and directed mobile carriers to block access. The reason for the ban is Telegram's failure to provide complete user data from 2 neo-Nazi group chats. So should that be shut down? Well, if you argue for free speech, they should be able to be there. So these 2 neo-Nazi group chats are believed to have incited attacks on schools in Brazil. The app is now subjected to a fine of almost $200,000 per day until it complies with the authorities' requests. The New York Times reports that the group chats were discovered on the phone of a teenager accused of committing 2 school shootings in November, resulting in the deaths of 3 people and 13 injuries. Authorities also found murder tutorials, what the hell, bomb-making instructions, that's even crazier, and violent videos in the group chats, along with Nazi content. Brazilian Justice Minister Flavio Dino stated that the anti-Semitic movement on these networks is at the base of violence against our children and our teens. And Judge De Silva revealed that Telegram only provided the information on the administrator of the channel called Brazilian Anti-Semitic Movement, but it failed to deliver data on the group members or any other information from the other channel known as Anti-Semitic Front. So Telegram claimed the groups were deleted and that they could not recover any of the data, which the judge deemed insufficient justification for non-compliance with the court's subpoena. I think that's funny. If the data is gone, because that's the idea of Telegram, right? If the data's gone, we can't do anything about it, but the court says bad luck. That seems like ridiculous. The ruling is seen as part of Brazil's push against a rise in school violence and raises questions about government control and the potential infringement on free speech. The Brazilian Supreme Court had previously banned Telegram for failing to freeze accounts spreading disinformation ahead of last year's presidential elections. However, the ban was quickly reversed and Telegram attributed its non-compliance to lost emails. I don't know how you lose an email. As local carriers comply with the ruling, several Telegram users have reported being unable to use the messaging app, while Google and Apple have been ordered to block the app. Critics argue that this movement represents an attack on free speech and an example of complete government control over a platform that they disapprove of. And I'm on both sides of the fence there, folks. So I can't decide if it's a good thing or a bad thing. The neo-Nazi stuff and, promoting all of that negativity, that's definitely a bad thing. And what the Justice Minister is saying there is that that ideology and that stuff is at the core of the problems in our society. I tend to agree with that as well. But does that mean we should be shutting something like this down? What do you think, Ed? Do you think that that's a bit of a bridge too far and a bit of government overreach? What do you reckon?
It absolutely is. We talked about this yesterday, that freedom of speech is enshrined in our Constitution, and freedom is, it's easy to agree with speech that you agree with, right? But the most important thing for us to protect is the speech you don't believe in, that you don't
even that with. Stuff,
even that stuff, short of inciting violence. I mean, if they are saying, okay, giving people instructions about how to attack a school, okay, that's where the line is drawn. So, but anything short of inciting violence or showing people how to make a nuclear bomb, stuff like that, short of that, if you truly believe in freedom of speech, everything goes, absolutely everything.
Because so can I have a bomb-making video on Telegram? Even though I'm not telling you how to use it, can I show you how to do it?
No, that would be a bridge too far.
Well, why is that any different for me showing you how to fix the carburetor?
Okay, that's a good point. Okay, maybe I will rethink that, because as long as you're not telling people, go and use this bomb to do that. That's a good point. That's a gray area. That's a gray area I'm willing to hear arguments about.
I think what the legal people would say to you there would be that is if you were putting a video out there of how to create an explosive device, there's only one reason that you'd be using that, is to hurt another person.
Yeah.
And therefore that is a version of inciting violence. That's what they would say.
Yeah.
And look, I think that the neo-Nazi ideology and all that garbage that these people are promoting and the anti-Semitism that they're promoting, does that have a place in modern society? I'm not sure.
Yes.
Yeah, it does. Like freedom of speech does. Look at you digging in with your American heels.
Yeah. Listen, I despise those groups just as much as the next person, any sane person. But I'll also die defending their right to express their opinion.
I have a hard time. I have a hard time with that.
Listen, if you are going to, this is why I don't believe in hate speech laws. I don't believe in hate. I mean, in England, and I'm sure in other countries, maybe in Australia too, if you say something, quote, hateful about a group or a person, you can be put in jail. Well, who is deciding what is hate speech and what isn't? And you better be careful what you wish for, because when the next guy gets in office, he might have different beliefs than you. And he might consider...
I think it's that story highlights exactly what you're saying, right? So Telegram got in trouble previously last year with the election, and they didn't like that people were spreading misinformation, but the government was determining what misinformation was, and so they fined them and shut them down. So let me just put the shoe on the other foot for you. Put the neo-Nazi stuff aside and all the doing harm to other people stuff aside for a sec. The government in the last couple of years completely lied to us. They lied to us about COVID. They lied to us about masks, about things you stick in your arm, they're lying to us about the environment. They're lying to us about energy crisis and food crisis. They're lying consistently. Nobody can trust anything that they say. The government puts out propaganda. It's not misinformation or disinformation. It's propaganda to perpetuate a narrative every day, but they're not blocked. They're not barred. The Taliban are still allowed on Twitter, but Donald Trump's off Twitter. Like all of those, the hypocrisy is like just so unbelievably alarming. And that's the thing that kind of grinds my gears the most, where the government says that neo-Nazi group's going to get off Telegram. All right, cool. I kind of understand why you say that. Get rid of them. They're idiots. But where do we draw the line? Because the line is you don't like that the opposition party is saying something about you that may or may not be true. And you don't have all of the facts. And somebody's going out there saying that because they believe it's true and they've got the information, but you go, no, that's not true. Shut them down. And so what they're doing is they're pulling the plug out of the wall, out of the app store. And they're saying, if you want to comply, if you want to continue to do business here in Brazil, Apple and Google and ISPs and domain service providers, we're going to pull you out of the wall. And I had this conversation with my brother. I remember during COVID, we were talking about how people were being censored and they were being cancelled. And the tool that the government uses, so the tool that Western governments use to sanction people is the SWIFT system. So you're no longer in the monetary system. You can't trade anymore. But funny enough, there was another story about Brazil today saying that they were going to buy all of their stuff from China in Chinese yuan from now on. No more USD there. So that's a big win for the Chinese and for the yuan, and that's a big problem for the Americans, right? So anyway, my brother and I were talking about the tools the government can use to shut you down. I was like, well, why don't you have a free speech platform like Getter, like Donald Trump, and Truth Social? He created his own one, and my brother said, because he's an IT guy, right? He's a really super technical dude. He said to me, it wouldn't matter if you had that, because at some point along that journey of you creating that, you went to the domain register and you registered unspokentruth.com.au or whatever domain you registered. And if the government didn't like what you were doing, they just go knock on the door of the domain register. Hey, see that IP address there? Yeah, that one right there. Switch it off. Yeah. But I don't think the government would even do that. The government just goes, what's his IP address? And they switch it off. Because the government's controlling the internet coming into the country. Switch that IP address off, the whole thing goes away.
Yeah, well, it's not even that hard. All they have to do is send a few FBI agents to sit with the upper management at Twitter to say, and they'll easily comply. I
was wrestling with the story of the latest release of of Twitter files today, but I just haven't had a chance to look through it all. But the headline to that is that these social media companies are all getting together, colluding with the authorities. Yeah. And what it says to me, my crazy conspiracy theory brother has been right the whole time. He's been right all along when he said that social media thing is a honeypot. It's a trap. It's a trap for you to put your whole life in there, and it's a trap to put everything in there so they know every single little thing about you. And I remember it was must have only been a couple of, maybe 2 years ago, just before COVID, I reckon. So 3 years ago, he got himself he never had like an iPhone. He never liked iOS, but he always had an Android phone, but he never let Google into his life. And then eventually he got a new handset, and he's got this fancy handset, and he logged in. I remember distinctly saying, oh, when you let Google into your life, it's like so much easier. It's like really good. I said, you let Google CIA in your life, you mean? And he's like, damn it, they got me. Damn it. And it's true, man. You let him in.
regarding free speech, though, the best answer to speech that you don't like is more speech. Okay, if there's speech out there that you don't like, well, then put out your counter argument.
I like that.
And it's the same. It's the same with the Second Amendment, guns. The best answer to a bad guy with a gun is a good guy with a gun.
It's true, isn't it? And it counters it perfectly every single time. And doesn't matter what you're talking about, what conversation it is. If you talk with that person, then you can either escalate that conversation or you de-escalate it and take the heat out of the conversation as well.
Yeah. As soon as you start shouting down voices that you don't agree with, there's a term for that. It's called fascism.
No, there's an ideology. Left ideology.
Well, is there a difference there? I'm trying to find the difference. Is there any sunlight between those two words?
No, I'm not sure. I just want to give one little piece of unspoken truth as we talk about free speech and as we talk about these platforms. And Telegram's supposed to be a place where you won't be censored and you can do whatever the hell you want. And I plan to do that later today. And I'm not doing anything inflammatory or inciting violence. What I'm going to try and do is give people a different perspective of actually what's going on in the war in Ukraine. Because if you saw what was really happening, you would be an anti-war person instantaneously.
Right. I would just encourage our audience out there, if there are sites out there who are spouting things that you find absolutely abhorrent, ironically, the way you should look at that is you should cheer it on, because that is a sign that you live in a free society. So you can absolutely hate the speech. You can actually abhor the message being put across, but you should cheer their ability to do it, because that's what separates a civilized society from a fascist society. So that's one way to look at it. So
it's
next time you see someone say something hateful, just say, man, that's really cool. That's really cool that he's allowed to say that garbage.
Yeah. Isn't it funny? It's the paradox of what you're saying in there. The unspoken truth here that I want to close out this little segment on, and I'll throw to you for the last bit here, Ed, is we now know my brother is not crazy. The whole thing was a honeypot, and it is a psyop. So when you log in with Google, the whole thing's a psyop. When you log into Facebook, yep. Instagram, yep. Snapchat, yep. Twitter, TikTok, yes. All of it, the government is in. Twitter anymore? No, I don't think so. But the rest of them, yeah, because the rest of them own that big tech stuff. It's there. So the latest iteration of that, and it's in the terms and conditions, is ChatGPT. So if you are so inclined and you're a nerd like me and you go away and read the terms and conditions of ChatGPT, if you put some information in on the front end of ChatGPT, meaning you're not plugged into the API, so you're not plugging in directly to ChatGPT and creating an app out of it yourself, ChatGPT can read it. They can see it. So if you're a company that creates code to build a platform like we're using here, so StreamYard or something like that. So imagine if you were a developer at StreamYard and you went, I've got a coding problem, I can't figure out how to fix that. I'll put it in ChatGPT, because the coding tools in there are incredible. So you put it in there and go, boop, and it fixes your problem. You paste it back into your Python development tool and you upload the update to StreamYard and you fix your problem. So now ChatGPT has got your little piece of code. They can see it. So is the whole thing a psyop? That's the unspoken truth. I think maybe the skeptic in me says yes. The person, the freedom-loving person that I am, hopes that it's not. And when you see the people behind ChatGPT, they're just as amazed by their progress as anybody else. I'll send you, and I'll link to a TED Talk down below as well that I want you to watch, just from like 4 or 5 days ago, from one of the founders of ChatGPT, and some of the things that he shows you. He does a demo on stage and there's a bit of a Q&A, and he's just as wowed by this technology as everybody else. But he's also trying to take a responsible attitude to it. But, so was everybody else. So was Mark Zuckerberg, and so was the guy who owned Twitter. But the whole thing is a giant psyop. So maybe ChatGPT is as well. Hopefully it's not. But I think maybe the skeptic.
I don't trust any of it.
All right. What have you got for us in the last segment there?
And that's from a guy who has a YouTube channel. So what am I going to do?
What do you got in the last segment? What are we talking about?
All right. So let's talk a little bit of controversy here. Let's shake things up, and I'm going to push the envelope a little bit, skirt the rules here, but I'm going to stay within the lines. But what I can talk about. But this is something I do want to get out. and that is regarding face masks. Okay, the reason why I want to bring this up is because there is a real health issue out there that most people are not aware of, and I want to make sure you know about this. If you're out there still wearing, where's my prop? If you're out there wearing those face masks still, I want you to understand the potential risks you're taking with your health. I put together a few clips here that make my point, and it's only about 3 minutes long, so bear with me. And at the end there, I got a funny little jingle. So let's listen to the clip. And the first clip is from Redacted. So if you're a fan of Redacted, just so you know, that's where I got it, and you might want to look them up on YouTube. Here we go.
Now, here is one of the most comprehensive studies about it that was just out this week, and it comes out of Germany. These are the researchers there, and it's called Possible Toxicity of Chronic Carbon Dioxide Exposure Associated with Face Mask Use, particularly in pregnant women, children, and adolescents. It is a literature review. They collected all of the literature on masking and carbon dioxide exposure for a very long time, and they collated it to see, what did we know, when did we know it, and why did we think this about masks? What they are saying is that they can make a connection between carbon dioxide exposure does happen when someone wears a mask, and undesirable things such as testicular dysfunction, stillbirths, reduced motor and verbal skills for children, and overall cognitive decline for children born during the pandemic. Now, they're not saying the masks cause these things. They're saying that something happens while wearing a mask which increases your exposure to CO2, and that prolonged exposure to CO2 has known side effects. And here is what the science says, according to this German study, that no comparable standard testing of masks for viruses has been established. In an important human subject evaluation with NaCl aerosol representing bacterial and viral particle size range, the general filtration efficacy of surgical and N95 masks for bigger bacteria-sized particles was better. But interestingly, most of the tested N95 respirators and surgical masks performed at their worst against particles approximately between this 0.04 and 0.02 size, which includes the sizes of COVID and influenza. Indeed, some modeling and in vitro laboratory simulation studies aim to demonstrate less virus transmissions when masks are used. So we never had a conclusive study showing that masks could block out COVID and the size of that virus. Here is from this study. It said that fresh air has around 0.04% CO2, while wearing masks more than 5 minutes bears a possible chronic exposure to carbon dioxide of 1.41 to 3.2% of the inhaled air. Although the buildup is usually within the short-term exposure limits, long-term exceedances and consequences must be considered due to experimental data. And then it goes on to talk about how even the U.S. Navy sets toxicity levels for CO2 exposure at 0.8, and masks are more than double that if you wear them for even 5 minutes.
Well, you blew it away, right? It's all complete garbage. You know, when that all first came out, there's a funny thing that happened on that redacted report, and I encourage everybody to go and watch it because it's pretty comprehensive and you got the key headlines out of it. But she talked about this: if you can smell one of those through your mask, then what's the chances of that stopping something coming through your mask, whatever it is, right? So it was all garbage. I don't know about you, Ed. Like I just did not comply. And the reason I didn't comply is because the minute that a politician came out and told me to do something, I said, no, I'm not going to do that. And I was like ostracized, and I got in trouble a couple of times, and, you know, I got in some arguments, and I nearly punched on with a few people a couple of times. And I yesterday, because that redacted report came out I think it was yesterday. Yesterday, I was up at the shops, and as I was walking to the supermarket, there's these stickers on the ground, and they're like 1.5 meters apart. And then when you go inside of the store, there's still stickers on the ground. And I thought to myself, I should take a photo of that and take a picture and say, remember when you fucking idiots thought that this was going to save you? And then you thought putting a piece of cloth on your face was going to save you. You are the stupidest people on planet Earth. And the people that govern us and run us and do that say that we were led by the science. But you know what? Even 3 years on, they still haven't shown us the science. They still haven't. And people were so stupid. Sorry, they were stupid if they were going to follow what a politician told them to do. And the minute the politicians came out and said that, and then they're waving their fingers at us saying, you need to report your neighbors. I'm like, I'm not doing anything that these people say. Nothing, not a single thing ever again in my whole entire life.
That's as it turns out, oxygen is pretty important, and
well, you breathe out carbon dioxide because it's not meant to be in your body, for heaven's sake. And no shit in the study. If you've got this thing on your face and you're breathing it in all the time, no shit that's going to be bad for you.
Well, I remember, look, honest to God, in the midst of all this, during one of our conversations, I told to Rob, I should dig out that clip. Rob, I'm waiting for the day when someone puts out a study saying that it's bad for us to breathe in our own carbon dioxide all day long. and here it is. I'm talking about talking about being ahead of the curve, right? And now they're starting to realize now that they didn't make a hard conclusion there, but come on, draw the dots, make the connection here.
I'm waiting for the day that a study comes out that tells you that listening to a politician about anything other than roads, rail, or school or infrastructure is a good idea. Anything beyond what their remit is a bad idea. And the health bureaucrats that were in charge are never held to account, ever. And the politicians that sign the checks and allow all of this to happen can't recall what happened, and they don't know how. And I said to my brother, it's funny as hell, like he's just so witty and his humor is so like sharp. I said to him, "Oh, did you see ScoMo got dragged in front of a parliamentary committee full of lawyers?" And ScoMo's a lawyer himself, right? And these lawyers were not having any of his political bullshit, none of it. And ScoMo's like one of the like sharpest politicians in Australia, or was. And these lawyers were just on him like badly. And I said to my brother, "Oh, did you see it?" I kind of put him to like that. And he goes, yeah, he probably just has to say sorry. That's it. Just completely destroyed the economy.
Again, there's no accountability. Listen, when a politician comes on the screen, there should be a warning label like on the side of a cigarette package saying, "No."
I don't know. Do you have that in America? The pictures of like lung cancer and like gangrene and shit.
Well, we don't have the pictures. We just have the warning.
We have pictures on the cigarette.
Yeah,
package.
I've heard about those. But listen, I think. You and I have talked about this global matrix that is in play here. And this is true, guys. And I am sure that there are several people at several of these global elite organizations who were thrilled about this event because it gave them a chance to it's a big test case, right? What can we get away with? What can we make everybody do? Can we get everybody to do this? Can we get everybody to do that? And the results were brilliant from their point of view. I mean, there are scores of images out there over a 2-year period of cities, name brand cities, New York, Chicago, Paris, where the cities were ghost towns. People were locked down. They wouldn't go out. People who couldn't visit their mother because in the nursing home or in the hospital, people who couldn't attend funerals of loved ones or weddings because of all this, people who there would be fist fights that break out in public over whether you're wearing a face mask or not, right? And you could not. Your life was limited if you weren't, stuck in the arm a couple times, and if you didn't have the right mask on, you were not allowed. And it was a roaring success from their perspective. So I'm sure these global elitists, they are, oh boy, what can we do next? What's they've already predicted the next super virus. Fauci.
Problem is Putin's in the way of it all.
He's just a distraction, right? They're probably waiting for this to get finish it up so we can get back to. But actually, I think they view these distractions. They're implementing things left and right. These CBDCs are still coming. Most people still don't know about them.
Yeah.
Digital IDs are being imposed.
Free medical care here in Australia has gone away completely. Completely gone away. No more bulk billing. No more any of that. You know, I remember in the height of that COVID garbage when they relaxed the rules here a little bit here in Sydney. I remember going for a walk with my missus and seeing all of these people in these cafes and restaurants, with a lot of that around where I live here. And I remember looking in there and Susie longingly looking in there, going, "Oh, I want that. I want to be part of that." And I said to her, all of those zombies in there, yeah, they're not going to be around soon. Yeah. And if I never, ever get to drink another cup of coffee or eat some food from that place, I don't care. I don't care. I just don't care. And I remember going into a place once and he goes, "Oh, you have to put a mask on, mate, if you want to come in here." And I said, "Make me." And like, they were like, ooh. And I remember that became my standard response early on is, "You have to do this, make me."
Well,
Or
the thing
call the
is,
police.
well,
Call them,
well,
make me.
the thing is that the government has all the guns, especially in Australia, right? Right, they got all the guns. They can, if you wanted to do things, this was an overt theft of our freedoms, of our God-given freedoms. I've shown you videos, and you've seen videos of those internment camps that you had in Australia, where I got in several of my videos of this poor woman in Australia who was on her porch in this little concentration camp, and the guards coming up in their full, surgical gear, telling, if you go past that yellow line, you're going to be charged $5,000.
I would have went past the yellow line 50 times a day. What are you going to do? Charge me. They're just a bunch of rule-following sooks.
They have ways of getting you.
Yeah.
They can get after your bank account. Just ask Justin Trudeau; he knows how to do it. They have ways. So this is why people have to be aware of what's going on and resist it. And the first thing you can do is, in the next election, ask the guy who's running for office how they feel about CBDCs, and if he's okay with them, find someone else to vote for. Don't
vote for him. Here in Australia, you talk about fines and all that sort of stuff. They used all of those things as the stick, right? There was no carrot. There was no incentive. It was all stick.
Right.
Yeah? And recently, probably most of this year, all of 2023, all of the fines and court cases that have been brought against people have been chucked out. Yeah.
Well, yeah,
so they've been thrown out because it's been seen to be unlawful. So they throw it all out.
And thank God. But you know what? It came down to one judge who made that decision, right? It could have gone the other way. If you had the wrong person sitting in that chair, it wouldn't have gone that way.
Yeah. Right? So, and hopefully that person is the right person every time.
Yeah. You can't rely on the right person doing the right thing at the right time. You have to, whatever we can do to secure our freedoms, we have to do it. And you know what? And it's not over, guys. It's still not over. This world, the effects of this worldwide flu are still not over. Now, I've got a blood clot in my leg, so I take my rat poison, as you call it, every day to keep it under control. But every once in a while, I go in to have my blood tested, right? And every time I go in, I still have to wear a mask to get into the building. Now, I'm not going to fight with them. I have to get my blood tested. And this is a hospital. You would think they would be up to speed on this stuff, right? But no. So I have to wear my mask while I'm in there getting the blood test. And you go in, and all the nurses they're wearing the surgical mask head to toe, and they've got the face still, even now. And they've got the plastic dividers, even at the local gas station. They still got the plastic dividers up. How about you guys? Did you guys ever have those plastic dividers up at the grocery store?
I know. I should have been in plexiglass during COVID. I would have made a fortune.
Yeah.
And that study that you just cited in that report, man, proves that all of that is just a waste of time, and it's just completely. It just there's no point. Anyway, that's a nice way to round out the show, folks. If you like what you've seen here today, please leave us a comment down below. Don't forget to subscribe, smack that bell as well, and make sure you follow us over on Spotify as well, so you've always got some unspoken truth in your ears. And you can catch us over on Twitter, on Telegram, and on Rumble as well. So we'd love to get your feedback. We'd love to hear what you think about the show. If you've got some guests that you'd like us to interview, let us know. And if you've got some topics that you want us to cover, please let us know that as well. Ed, have you got any closing thoughts, mate, before we wrap up today?
Reduce your exposure to your bank, put some of that money into gold and silver, and establish streams of passive recurring income.
One more time. I'm going to stop the music. Go. Reduce your exposure to the banks. Get your money out of there. Yeah.
Reduce your exposure to your bank.
Get some passive income.
You jumped in my pattern. Just take care of yourself.
There it is, folks. All right. Thanks, Ed. Really appreciate seeing you today, mate. And thanks, everybody. We'll see you tomorrow. It's bye for now.